strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey towards the dark side will be complete.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my top 20 Star Wars Rise of Skywalker WTF questions. Everyone had a lot of questions about some of the plot turns, the mythology. They changed a bunch of things, so we'll break it all down. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. There's going to be a bunch of Mandalorian stuff coming up next week, too. So obviously, careful for spoilers if you have not seen Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, because we'll be talking about the end of the movie, really specific details, so just once more, spoiler warning. Here we go, starting with number 20. How did Palpatine survive the fall? Late in the movie, Emperor Palpatine says, "You shall fall just as I once fell." It's not a metaphor, it's a literal thing, getting thrown down a pit. But the best explainer is that he was able to use his dark side force abilities to preserve his body upon impact, and these Sith acolytes that you see serving him here just happened to also be on the Death Star, and then took him to the Sith planet to try and preserve his body before he completely degraded. But number 19, where did Snoke come from if Emperor Palpatine says, "I made Snoke"? What does that mean? Did he engineer him? Did he just find him and then turn him into his next acolyte? And if later in the movie he says that he is all of the Sith and Rey has to kill him and then the Sith will enter her and she'll become Sith, does that also mean that Snoke was not a Sith? They get really tricky with the rules in this movie, which is why there's a little bit of confusion with some of the plot turns. The best explanation is that Snoke was a separate person that he found, then turned to his will, and then proceeded to clone a bunch of times because he was using him for his plan. So the Snoke that we met during the course of the new trilogy could have been the second or third version of Snoke. It didn't have to be the first necessarily. The reason why Snoke looks so broken is because he got into a fight before Ben Solo fell to the dark side with Luke Skywalker, and Luke Skywalker did that to Snoke. So that's why he kind of walks with that weird limp. That's why his face is all messed up. So number 18, follow-up question. That's what's going on with the tank of spare Snoke clones. They also kind of imply that those are failed clones, like, oh, this is their attempts to clone Snoke. Some of them are more successful than others. They just throw the spares in this one tank here, and it's just meant to look really freaky. It's all about the Sith combining technology with the Force to manipulate life. It's actually pretty classic deep cut for Sith powers, if you've ever read Golden Age of the Sith or any of the Dark Horse comics about the Sith characters. So number 17, WTF, follow-up question. If the rule of two had been a big thing during the prequel series that George Lucas said had been around for centuries, the way they explained it when we got to Phantom Menace is that the rule of two had been going on for a long, long time. Then where did the Sith planet come from, and are all those Sith in the stands of the arena at the end of the movie alive, or are they just spirits and Palpatine is conjuring them to freak Rey out? The name of the planet is Exegol, so my understanding is that this is the ancient planet of the Sith. So I can believe that at some point before the Rule of Two, this was a planet full of Sith. There are a bunch of other Sith acolytes there, but they don't feel like they're full Sith themselves. My initial interpretation of all the voices in the chorus in the stands, all those people that were chanting while this was going on, were just the spirits of the Sith. Like he said, all the Sith are within me, and he was just sort of conjuring them to freak Rey out. But number 16, if Palpatine was always planning on coming back and had been making that fleet the whole time, why did he also bother having Snoke go through the trouble of creating another fleet in the First Order? Why not just start with the Red Sith Trooper fleet? The best explanation I can think of for this is that it was all about baiting the galaxy with something that was a little bit different. Like, oh, we have something different from the Empire. We're not as bad as them. We have a much better way. We have this new order we're going to create. It won't be like things were before, but surprise, it's a lot like things were before when they actually do take over the galaxy, especially with the Starkiller base. The main reason why this feels kind of weird is just because you have different filmmakers for each of the different films, although technically J.J. Abrams came back at the last minute to do Rise of Skywalker. But the whole idea with those classic Star Destroyers and the super lasers on them is that those are meant to be miniaturized versions of the Death Star lasers, so that each one of those many Star Destroyers is capable of destroying a planet by itself. So instead of having one big giant planet-killing weapon going around the galaxy, you have thousands of planet-killing weapons. But number 15, WTF, this is a big one. Who were Rey's parents, and why did they leave her on Jakku? Her mother's actually Jodie Comer, who you might recognize from the BBC show Killing Eve. I thought that was actually a good choice of that actress. But the whole idea is that Palpatine had a son, and that son married this woman. They had a child. That child was Rey. and he was so afraid of his father that he decided to leave and be no one, as they explain. It was their way of sort of massaging the big twist into what was done during Last Jedi, even though it doesn't feel like they completely earned it, like, oh, they decided to be no one. He explains to Rey at the end of the movie that the plan was always to bring her back and turn her to the dark side, and either have her take over for him and become Empress Palpatine, or if she could not be turned, then he would just take over her body with his Force spirit. Big follow-up question, I saw this on all the Star Wars videos that I posted. Who was Palpatine's wife? Who did he get busy with to create that son that then created Rey? Because unless you're manipulating midichlorians like he did with Anakin Skywalker, you can't get one without the other. I'll also explain that too, another follow-up after this. Where did Anakin Skywalker come from, and is he also the son of Palpatine, making Rey slightly part Skywalker? Technically, the answer to that is no, but I'll answer that after I answer about Palpatine's wife. So obviously, Palpatine at some point during his life had a humanoid female woman that he was in love with, or maybe that he was just with, didn't have to be in love, and had a child with her. Everybody remember the Star Wars Underworld live-action TV series that George Lucas had planned? They wrote about 50 episodes or so. The scripts are all done, but they canceled it before they started shooting it because he sold Lucasfilm to Disney before they started ramping up on production for that. During that series, there was going to be a woman that was a member of the criminal underworld, a fairly powerful crime boss, that Palpatine had been in love with at some point, and she had broken his heart. So it's implied that they had had a relationship at some point. It's possible that his son came from that woman. There's also a lot of people during the prequels that see this woman, Sly Moore, the bald woman next to him. She's a dark side Force adept who always served him and stayed nearby him. It's also possible that that's Rey's grandmother. Number 13 WTF question, why does Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, see Han Solo if Han Solo isn't capable of becoming a Force ghost? They kind of explain this through the course of the movie as he's talking through, like, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm just a figment of your imagination. I'm a memory of yours. Because you notice that Han Solo isn't glowing blue like a Force ghost. So really what's going on in this moment is that Kylo Ren is talking to himself. I realize what I have to do, but I don't know if I can do it. And he's sort of remembering Han Solo as he was during the moment where he killed him. It's meant to be a callback to them on the walkway during Force Awakens on the Starkiller base. Number 12. When did Leia complete her Jedi training and become a Master, as Rey calls her during the movie Master? There's this idea that sometime after Return of the Jedi, Leia started to complete her Jedi training with Luke Skywalker. She even made a lightsaber, which shows up during the movie, but then sensed through the Force that her son had been tempted by the dark side of the Force, and it scared her so much that she just put it aside. That's why her lightsaber had been with Luke Skywalker on that island the whole time. It's implied, though, that in the 25 years between when that happened and the new trilogy, that she completed her training enough so that she could help train Rey. So I don't know if she was able to become a full Jedi Master, but also it's implied that because she became a Force ghost, at some point, one of the Force ghosts of the past, either Obi-Wan or Yoda or someone else, taught her how to do it too. Both Ben Solo and Leia turn into Force ghosts during the movie, but technically you actually have to learn how to do that. You don't just do that because you're a Jedi. Number 11, why were the little triangle Sith devices called Sith Wayfinders instead of just calling them Sith holocrons like they were designed to look? All the longtime Star Wars fans probably saw this pop up for the first time before they started talking about it and thought, oh, Sith holocrons, that's great. Okay, Jedi holocrons are pretty cool. Of course they're Sith holocrons. It makes sense that they would include that in the film. Big deep cut Easter egg. I think the reason why they call them Sith Wayfinders instead is really just for the general audience that's not familiar with expanded Star Wars canon, and they just wanted to make it as simple to understand as possible. Oh, this thing is going to help me get to that place. And that's the only reason they did that. They only exist in the movie to be MacGuffins to get them from point A to point B. Number 10 WTF question follow-up. If one of them had belonged to Darth Vader, did he also travel to the Sith planet? Had he been here before? Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? So if Anakin Skywalker wanted to learn all about cheating death, the secrets would probably be on this planet. So I think it's safe to assume that he spent some time here. Number 9, big question that I saw after the movie. Is Finn actually Force sensitive? Because at several points in the film, he says, I have a feeling. And even later in the movie, he starts to sense things that are happening to Rey from very, very far away. The fact that they do it so many times makes me feel like, yes, he is definitely Force sensitive. She even passes him the lightsaber, which I think is a callback to Force Awakens, where Finn used the lightsaber a couple different times. Number 8, also big question. Why does Rey's new lightsaber look like that with a very different looking black hilt in the yellow Kyber crystal? Metaphorically, I think it's just the idea that she's accepted who she comes from. She's a Palpatine, she comes from evil. That's what the black is meant to represent. I wouldn't be surprised, this is just speculation, but I would not be surprised if some of the metal of that lightsaber was taken from the metal of the wreckage of the second Death Star. It's all part of the themes of the whole new trilogy, even if it wasn't clear. It doesn't matter where you come from. It's all about who you choose to be. You can choose to be a good person even if you come from evil. So I think metaphorically, making a lightsaber that looks like that is just meant to acknowledge where she comes from. As for the yellow kyber crystal, I think that's a bit of a meta reference to not only the character choosing a new path, not something that's come before, so it's not green like Luke Skywalker's, it's not blue like Anakin Skywalker's, it's obviously not red because she's not a dark side Sith Force user. It's just meant to show you, oh, this is going to be going in a new direction now, and you just kind of left to wonder what that's going to look like. Number 7 WTF question, what does it mean that Rey and Kylo Ren are a Force dyad? So what they say is that they're two halves of one Force being in two different bodies, but how were they born that way? Did it have something to do with some crazy midichlorians explainer? Was Palpatine responsible for doing this? It's been explained that Snoke didn't know about the Force dyad. He wasn't aware of what was going on during Last Jedi when they were both together. So if he didn't know, I think it's safe to assume that Palpatine didn't always know that they were a Force dyad, maybe only discovered that pretty late in the game. But they get into a lot of this really crazy expanded Force lore during Star Wars The Clone Wars. Maybe they'll address that when The Clone Wars comes back in February. That's actually when all those Clone Wars episodes are going to air. But the idea at the end of the movie with them sharing each other's life force, like she heals him earlier in the movie with a little bit of her life force, and then at the end of the movie, he heals her with the last of his life force, like it's not enough for him to be able to continue to live, so that's why he dies. But because they're one half of one Force being, metaphorically what they're trying to say is that now it's two halves of one person, the Ben Solo half of that Force dyad now lives within Rey, and she's one complete person. So even though his physical body is dead, he lives on in her. That's why he sort of disappeared and turned into a Force ghost. But number 6, also a big canon question, what does it mean when Palpatine says he contains all the souls of the Sith who came before? The whole idea before this movie is that the rules were that Sith could not become Force Ghost, only Jedi. There's a line of dialogue from Yoda somewhere before this where he says something about the Sith not being able to use this as a path to immortality. The way the Sith typically preserve their lives are either through technology, Sith technology like the Emperor has here, or literally just transplanting their Force essence into someone else and taking over their body. They could bind their souls to objects, but you never really saw all these souls living within one person. So this is a brand new thing that they either introduced for this movie or just something that they made up at the last minute. So don't tie yourselves in a knot trying to figure this out too much. But number 5, what's the deal with the Knights of Ren in this movie? They never fully explain them, but they're basically dark side acolytes, not full Sith themselves because they don't use lightsabers, they just use those weapons. Clearly they really serve Palpatine because they turn on Ben Solo when he becomes Ben Solo again, coming back to the Sith planet. Number 4, this is also a big question. What was Finn going to tell to Rey? They had several scenes in the movie, and even Poe Dameron was like, you gonna tell her when Poe's not around? Is that what's going on here? If it wasn't clear from that very leading Poe Dameron line there, he was going to try and tell her that he loved her until he met the female version of Finn. He literally meets another girl who is a stormtrooper and has the exact same backstory that he does. That's why I'm calling her Female Finn. But number 3, big question, why did Rey choose the Skywalker name at the end of the movie? And is she really related to Anakin Skywalker? Because technically they both come from Palpatine. The main reason why she takes the Skywalker name is to honor them and because they felt like the family that she never had. Like Luke Skywalker was the father she never had. Leia was the mother she never had. Yes, technically, she is kind of related to Anakin Skywalker because they were both created by Palpatine, but not by blood, not by genetic material. Palpatine used his Sith powers in the midichlorians to create a fetus out of nothingness, implant that into Shmi Skywalker, and that's where Anakin Skywalker came from. He has no biological father. Rey was created the old-fashioned way. She is the direct biological granddaughter of Palpatine. So technically she's not related to the Skywalkers, but you could claim a loose connection between their two lines. Number 2, follow-up question, what is Rey going to do next now after she buries these 2 lightsabers on Tatooine in the moisture farm? If you've been listening to the Rise of Skywalker soundtrack, the really interesting detail is that the track that plays over this scene is called A New Home. Does that imply that Rey is now going to live on Tatooine and continue her Jedi training here? She has all of the Jedi texts, so I think it's implied that she's going to do the same thing that Luke Skywalker did after Return of the Jedi, try to rebuild the Jedi Order and eventually create a new temple of her own. So the number one WTF question, where is Baby Yoda in all this? Because if he's about 50 right now in The Mandalorian and what's happening in the movies is about 25 years after that, he'd be way more powerful, but he'd still be a relative youngling by the standards of his race. Eventually, they would have to cross paths and they would have to start training together, but then the idea is that the legacy of the Jedi, because Baby Yoda is so long-lived, he lived for a potential 900 years like Yoda, he would become the future of the Jedi and live to see all those future generations. If you have any big questions about the movie that I didn't answer in this video, just write them below in the comments, but hopefully that answers most of the big ones. There's an Easter egg video that I'll try to do tomorrow. I also have some Witcher Netflix videos because that series just started, and there'll be some Mandalorian stuff coming up real soon. So everyone, click here for my brand new Mandalorian video, and click here for my full Rise of Skywalker review. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.